This evening are being said by Reverend June Human from St Margaret's, Uxbridge.
As we pray, when I say, Lord, in your mercy, you may like to respond, hear our prayer. So, Father, as we come together, we thank you for the London Borough of Hillingdon. We pray for the people of this borough, all the diverse communities that are part of it. Pray that your purposes, your ways will be worked out in all that goes on, and your love will flow throughout this borough and all its people. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. We pray this night for all who work so hard to serve this borough in many different ways. We thank you for all the time and energy that they give. Ask that you will empower them and give them wisdom and strength, hour by hour, day by day. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. And we remember before you, Father God, those in particular need in this borough, those facing illness, loss, difficult times. Pray that you would meet with them, bring your healing grace. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Finally, we pray for the council meeting this evening. Pray especially as the budget is set that you will lead all the discussions and enable wise decisions to be made. Indeed, we pray for your will to be done. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. We finish with the prayer of St. Francis. Lord, make us channels of your peace. Where there is hatred, let us bring your love. Where there is injury, your pardon, Lord. Where there is darkness, only light. And where there is sadness, ever joy. We ask all these things in your precious name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for those prayers. You may be seated. I'm now going to ask the Head of Democratic Services to make a statement about the visual and audio-visual arrangements.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the reminder of the members present and for the information of all those in the public gallery tonight. So I'd just like to confirm that this evening sees the first live broadcast of a council meeting at the London Borough of Hillingdon. This will be being broadcast live on our YouTube channel and with about a minute's delay. 3 cameras in the room tonight. This camera over here focuses mainly on the top dais here. The camera at the back there gives a sort of rear view of the room. This camera is the most interesting one. This faces the members, and whenever you press your microphone to speak, it will zoom in on you in a close-up of spectacular proportions. Very close-up. For the public gallery, please be aware, the cameras are not trained on the public gallery, but obviously they might catch you at some point. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
When you've all finished preening yourselves in preparation, Councillor Bianco, you wish to make a statement.
Zoom, zoom. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With permission, I would like to make a brief statement. At the last council meeting, whilst perhaps being a little flippant, I referred to a gentleman in the public gallery, Mr. Campbell, who has frequented our last few meetings with recording equipment as a Labour Party stooge. It has subsequently been brought to my attention that I was mistaken, and that Mr. Campbell, whilst previously a candidate for the Labour Party in Hillingdon on 4 occasions, in West Ruislip in 2006, again in 2008 at the by-election, in Brunel in 2010, and in Hillingdon East in 2014, is not, in fact, working directly for the Hillingdon Labour Party in respect of these recordings. Mr. Mayor, with your indulgence, I'd like to apologise to Mr. Campbell, who I'm glad to see is in the public gallery once again this evening with his camera. It is fitting that I should be able to use this evening to make this apology, as this is the first meeting, as has just been mentioned, that is being broadcast live across the planet, and even, I suppose, further afield to include the International Space Station, always assuming that they are watching. Thanks to our new investment in broadcasting technology. And this, of course, is the reason the Chief Whip is wearing her best frock and the Leader and I our best suits. Mr. Campbell, I know that referring to someone as a member of the Hillingdon Labour Party when they are not has the potential to cause a great many people serious offence. And I sincerely apologise for any offence that may have been caused to you by such an accusation. Members of the public are, of course, free to record council meetings and to use those recordings how they wish. I can only think that I noticed a slight improvement in the performance from the members opposite in the chamber and assumed they had been benefiting from the videos for training purposes. As I mentioned earlier, I accept now that this is not the case and that any temporary improvement in performance was as coincidental as it will be short-lived, and I look forward to welcoming you back here in the future. Mr. Mayor, as many members know, the Cabinet operates a charitable fine system, the proceeds of which are donated to the Mayor's charity. And I'm delighted to tell you that as its Master-at-Arms, I have fined myself on this occasion and will be making a suitable donation as a consequence. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that statement. I'm also very pleased to see Councillor Mo Kashid here today, and it's really nice to have you back with us, Mo.
Mr. Mayor, it's a pleasure to be back. I just wanted to say thank you to all the officers and most of the councillors who have been sending me their good wishes, and their best wishes have been with me. And thanks to Hayfield Hospital that I'm back here again.
We now move on to item 1 on the agenda. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have apologies from Councillors Chapman and Riley.
Are there any other apologies? In which case we move on to item 2, the minutes of the previous meeting that have been circulated. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. As there are no matters raised, are you happy that we accept that as a full record of the meeting? Thank you. We now come to the next item on the agenda, which is declarations of personal interest. Does anyone have any declaration?
Mr. Mayor, at this point, if I could just remind members of the requirement, it's set out on the agenda page there. Any member who is more than 2 months in arrears with their council tax or has arrears of council tax must declare that fact and not vote on the budget item.
No declarations of interest. In which case, I'll move on to Mayor's announcements. We've had a lovely time since the last council meeting. We thoroughly enjoyed, we being myself and the Mayoress, the Chinese New Year celebrations that we shared with the members of the Chinese community in London. We also had a wonderful concert at the Winston Churchill Hall celebrating the diversity of Hillingdon's cultural traditions with music and dance from many nations. We also this week visited the Old Bailey. And the Mayoress had a lovely time on our Twitter page by putting on the tweet, "The Mayor is in chains heading towards the Old Bailey." I didn't quite know how to take that, but it was a fascinating trip and a great insight into the way the Old Bailey works. We also had a pleasant time around Windsor Guildhall, which of course our Head of Democratic Services knows only too well, and numerous schools. But what I would like to point out to you all is we have amongst us someone who is exceptional. Exceptional for many reasons. Someone who completed 4 consecutive full marathons. Now that for most people would be a tremendous achievement. But when you look at his record, this person has completed 187 marathons and has raised, over the years, in excess of £15,000 for charities. Not only that, he's a member of 2 very exclusive clubs. The 100 Club, which means he's run over 100 marathons. He's also a member, if that isn't enough, of the 7 Continent Club. And those of you who did due geography will be thinking to yourself, 7? Hold on. That includes the southern continent. And indeed it did, because he has also completed a marathon in Antarctica. Now, I think that is absolutely fantastic that he achieves that. And the 4 marathons that he did in Milton Keynes, I would ask you all to join me in a round of applause for this wonderfully fit person. I mean, of course, tremendous model of fitness and health. And some of us here have done half marathons, I know, and could only dream of doing full marathons. Councillor Singh has also informed me today that he intends to run Hillingdon half marathon with his wife, and will be doing that for the Mayor's charity as well. We wish you well with that. The Mayor's charity also is pleased to report to you that it's now fully operational, and imminently we will be able to accept online donations via the various media, i.e. Just Giving, etc. As soon as that information is available, we will circulate it to you, and those who wish to contribute are more than welcome to do so. Finally, on the 1st of March, we're having Murder in the Air, a production, a murder mystery being put on by Uxbridge College at their Hayes campus, starting with a glass of champagne and ending with, oh dear, murder most foul taking place, followed by dinner. Should you wish to attend, do contact the Mayor's Parlour. Places are limited, but the food will be excellent. Those of you who've dined at Uxbridge College's campus in Hayes will know that the food is delicious. So that concludes my announcements, as I'm now on this is my penultimate appearance in this chair, and whoopee, I'm looking forward to rest. We now move on to item 5, the report of Head of Democratic Services. Councillor Puddy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are 3 recommendations contained within this report, and I will move them individually. The first is to ask Council to note the use of urgency provision in the 9 decisions detailed in the agenda. I move this recommendation.
Do you have a seconder?
And reserve my right.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak on this? In which case... Councillor Eggington. You indicated, Councillor Eggington? So we delete that request. Do I gather it was a little premature? Okay. Are we all in favour of recommendation small 1? Great. Councillor Puddifoot. Seconder?
Mr. Mayor, I formally second and reserve my right.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Councillor Puddifoot.
Mr Mayor, the third item is to note that the current scheme for members' allowances must be revoked by the 31st of March 2016 and a new scheme for 2016-17 covering both the basic and responsibility allowances needs to be approved. As in previous years, all allowances will be carried forward at the current rate and aligned to the annual local government pay settlement. For the benefit of the public here tonight, that means that allowances paid to councillors rise at the same percentage rate as that paid to our staff. And all councillors have the right to waive any increase or indeed any or all of their allowances by writing at any time to the Finance Director requesting this. Also for the benefit of the public, by law this has to be a recorded vote, with each councillor called by name declaring their vote. Mr Mayor, the detail of the proposed scheme is shown in Appendix B, and I will first move the basic allowance for 2016-17 at £10,819.25 to be paid to all councillors, that the scheme as detailed in paragraphs 4 to 12 of the appendix is agreed. I so move.
Is that seconded?
Mr. Mayor, I formally second and reserve my right.
Thank you. Councillor Eggington.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move an amendment to this recommendation. The proposal is to reduce the special allowances for Cabinet members by 20%.
Councillor Eggington. Could you put your microphone on, please, Councillor?
Thank you. Many families in Hillingdon are struggling, and many will not receive any increase in their wages in the forthcoming year. Additionally, some common benefits such as tax credits and local housing allowances are being frozen. Within each of our wards, there are many households who are receiving these benefits. We are therefore proposing that if there is any settlement of the local government pay offer, it should not be reflected in the allowances, either basic or special. Mr. Mayor, I would like to slightly alter the amendment in that to add at the end, after any annual pay award to staff, to put in, but any increase shall be gifted to the Mayor's charity.
Mr Mayor, this is ridiculous. Can he move his amendment so we can move on? We've got a lot to do tonight.
Mr Mayor, as I understand, Councillor Eggington is moving what is set out just before the bold paragraph B there, that the level of basic and special responsibility allowances that should not be increased with any annual pay award to staff, but that any increase that may have been awarded as a result of that should be gifted to the Mayor's charity.
Do you have a seconder for that motion?
Yes, I'd like to second that amendment. With the changes to discounts on council tax affecting the most vulnerable in our borough, it's surely wrong to reward ourselves with an increase in members' allowances. I believe we're in privileged positions, and contributing any increase to the Mayor's charity demonstrates that our communities, that we put our residents first. In the unlikely event that this amendment is voted down, though, those of us in the Labour group will certainly be donating any increase to the Mayor's charity. I support and second the amendment.
Are there any... Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I stated when moving the recommendation, every councillor has the ability at any time to write to the Corporate Director of Finance waiving any proposed increase or indeed accepting a reduction of up to 100% of the allowance entitlement. Should a rise in line with the annual local government pay settlement occur, then Labour members should all do this. Whilst they are pondering whether they should consider requesting the 20% reduction that they said they would do at the last local election. I will come back to the 20% issue when dealing with Councillor Eddington's next amendment, but I will later in the year bring this matter back to Council to establish which Labour councillors have done this and which have not. We will not support the amendment.
Do we have any other speakers? Councillor Eddington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think that Councillor Puddifoot is understanding that the idea is that as a council as a whole we should make this commitment. It is likely to be a relatively small increase anyway, but nevertheless the idea that we can demonstrate to our constituents, to all of the residents of Hillingdon, that we are putting their interests first, that we are making a contribution to your, Mr. Mayor's, your charity, I think is worthwhile. So I'd ask everybody to support the amendment.
Are there any other speakers?
Mr. Mayor, we now move to the vote on the amendment for the benefit of those in the public gallery and for clarification for members. We're voting on the proposed amendment from Councillor Eddington, which the majority of which is set out in the middle of page 2, with the addition of the sentence that
Mr. Mayor,
any
can I have a
increase...
recorded vote on this, please?
Right. We have a request.
Thank you. I'll ask each member in turn whether they are voting for the amendment moved by Councillor Eddington, against it, or whether they're abstaining. Councillor Ahmad Walana. Councillor Allen.
For the amendment.
Councillor Barnes. Councillor Bianco. Councillor Birra. Councillor Bridges. Councillor Burles. Councillor Burrows. Councillor Chamdell. Councillor J. Cooper. Councillor Cawthorne. Councillor Crowe. Councillor Curling. Councillor Dan. Councillor Davis. Councillor Dennis. Councillor Deere. Councillor Dillon. Councillor Dott. Councillor Deducci. Councillor Duncan. Councillor East. Councillor Edwards. Councillor Eddington. Councillor Flynn. Councillor Fife. Councillor Gardner. Councillor Garg. Councillor Gillam. Councillor Graham. Councillor Hagger. Councillor Higgins. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Jadjusi. Sorry, Councillor Jadjusi, thank you. Councillor Kaufman. Councillor Kelly. Councillor Katra. Councillor Kashid. Councillor Lakmana. Councillor Lavery. Councillor Lewis. Councillor Markham. Councillor Melvin. Councillor D. Mills. Councillor R. Mills. Councillor Money. Councillor Morgan. Councillor Morse. Councillor Nelson. Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Oswell. Councillor Palmer. Councillor Puddifoot. Councillor Sansapuri. Councillor Seaman Digby. Councillor Simmons. Councillor Singh. Councillor Stead. Councillor Sweeting. Councillor White. Councillor Yarrow. Mr. Mayor.
Not voting.
Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Not voting.
Mr. Mayor, that amendment is lost. Now revert back to the original motion.
Okay. We now go straight to the vote on the original motion. All those in favour, will you indicate? All those against?
Carried.
Motion carried. We move on to the next item. Councillor Puddifoot.
Mr. Mayor, I now turn to the special responsibility allowances as detailed in paragraph 3. At the last council election in May 2014, the Labour group, in certain knowledge that they would not be elected by the residents of Hillingdon to run this borough, promised to reduce allowances paid to councillors by 20%, around £250,000. At the council tax meeting last year, they were given the opportunity to reduce their allowances appropriately, but when given the responsibility, voted to take every penny available in both basic and responsibility allowances. Mr Mayor, given that tonight our meeting is being broadcast live and recorded and will be a matter of public record, I do hope that the Labour group, having taken the 100% basic allowance, voluntarily now reduce them by 20%, and at least honour their promise as regards their special responsibility allowance that they receive. Accordingly, I will move this recommendation in two parts. The first covering the allowances paid to Conservative councillors for their responsibility in administering the affairs of the council at numerous levels in different areas of responsibility, and the second covering additional payments made to members of the Labour group for their responsibilities as the opposition party. I regard this as a matter of honour for the Labour group, but when putting together my notes for tonight, I realised that I would not have the available time to deal with this aspect appropriately. But joy of joys, Councillor Eggington has obliged me with an additional 3 minutes to talk by proposing an amendment. So at this point, Mr Mayor, I will formally move recommendation B on the order paper covering responsibility allowances 1 to 16.
Do we have a seconder?
Mr Mayor, I formally second. I am advised by those experts in such media technology that it is highly likely that Comrade Corbyn is watching this on his iPhone and is very keen to see the lead that the Labour group may or may not be taking this evening. So we can rest assured that today Hillingdon, but tomorrow the screens of the world, as Councillor Bianco has perhaps said to me, perhaps today Hillingdon, maybe tomorrow Hillingdon as well.
Councillor Eggington, you've indicated.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move what I tried to move earlier on in the wrong order. The proposal to amend the special responsibility allowances for the Cabinet, reducing them by 20%. I do this on the basis that the Hillingdon special responsibility allowances are significantly above the level of other London boroughs. In fact, probably in certain adjoining boroughs, they're almost twice as much. And particularly so, they're twice as much as in those other boroughs. The current special allowances paid to Cabinet cost council taxpayers, and that includes the vulnerable and financially disadvantaged of working age, who we imposed which council decided to impose the extra cost of council tax. It costs in total £320,000, according to my estimates. I should stress that this includes the cost of the special responsibility allowance for the leader of this council, which means during his present tenure, his cost for council just about £1 million. He hasn't taken it home. He's an accountant. I'm an accountant. I know he hasn't taken it home. It isn't piled up in his backyard, but it has cost council taxpayers that sort of sum. I'm sure it's good value. I'm sure you think it's good value. Anyway, I know that council taxpayers would prefer to see a reduction in council tax or an improvement in their services rather than paying some of the highest special responsibility allowances. And therefore, I move this amendment.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
I'll second and reserve my right.
Councillor Puddifoot.
You really couldn't make it up, could you? As I said, the matter of councillors' allowances became an election issue in 2014, with the Labour group stating in their literature that they would, and I quote, and we hear it again tonight, take action on the cost of living crisis, starting with a reduction in councillors' allowances, saving more than £250,000 for you, the taxpayer. And that the council leader has pocketed £1 million of your money. Pocketed, yeah. I pointed out in the response that during my then 14 years as leader of the council, I'd actually pocketed £373,657 and publicly stated that Labour were either liars or financially incompetent. That's liars or financially incompetent. Either way, Labour were not fit to run Hillingdon. The residents of Hillingdon agreed. They did not agree with Councillor Eggington. That's why there's 42 of us and 23 of them. As I said earlier, the Labour group have been given the opportunity at least to honour their election pledge as regards their own allowances to help that cost of living crisis, but declined, deciding instead to take the money. Members' allowances cost a total of about £1.3 million in basic and responsibility allowances, so a 20% reduction would be about approximately the 250k that they were talking about. However, with 23 members of the Labour group taking 249,000 in basic allowances and just under 78,000 in responsibility allowances, 20% of the total of both would amount to £65,000, which is not far off the reduction of £66,000 that Labour feel the Conservative group should take whilst they take the full allowance. What about the poor and needy? What are you doing about it? You're sitting there doing nothing. Mr Mayor, each one of the Labour councillors is a decent person. As individuals, I have respect for many of them, but not as a Labour group. I referred earlier to my challenge at the last election that Labour were either financially incompetent or liars. Tonight they will have the opportunity to add the word hypocrite to that list. This attempt to divert attention away from their stated position will not work. We will obviously not support the amendment, and I will again return to this matter once we have done so and voted the substantive proposal on the order paper through.
Any other speakers? Councillor Curling.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I really must say, I didn't intend to speak on this item, but I really must after that tirade from the Leader of the Council. The Labour group did, I think it was the previous pay increase we had, the Labour group have donated and maintain an ongoing donation of that pay increase to the Hillingdon Food Bank, doing our bit for the needy. Personally, I also make a donation out of my council allowances, as I've done from the start, to Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital, because I have good reason to do so. The Leader of the Council talks as if we take this money and go to lavish parties and stuff. The real point is we are not in control. That manifesto was, if we were in control, that's what we would have done. The party opposite are in control, and so we can only do limited things. Yes, we could decline some of our allowances, but if the Leader of the Council and his group wishes to push through increases, then I will just up the amount that I pay to charities. And the amendment that we had earlier on to pay the 1% to the Mayor's charity failed. This group will be honouring that, and we will be paying any increase that actually happens to the Mayor's charity. But I really don't think the Leader of the Council can blame us for not fulfilling our manifesto when we're not in control of the Council in order to do so. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Mills.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just picking up on Councillor Curling's point, he's absolutely right. You're not in control. And we are in control, and we have sound financial management. However, we're giving you the golden opportunity tonight to honour this part of your manifesto commitment, because I know the Leader and all our group would be happy to abstain on any amendment that you subsequently put forward that reduces your allowances by the amount you said in your manifesto. And what would really be hypocritical is not just not doing that tonight, but when we get to the next council elections, is for you to carry on saying the Leader has pocketed over £1 million and we're going to reduce the expenses by 20%. That would be super hypocritical. So the option to you tonight is to move the amendment, reduce your expenses by 20%, and the Conservative team here will not vote and allow you to have 20 seconds of control. Take it up.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Dillon, you reserved your right. Do you wish to speak now? Councillor Eggington, you wish to speak? Right. It now goes to the vote. All those in favour of the proposed amendment, would you please show? Up. Okay. All those against? The motion is lost. We now move to the substantive motion. All those in favour of the substantive motion? And all those against? The substantive motion is passed. Councillor Puddifoot.
Mr Mayor, I will now deal with the special responsibility allowances for the Labour Group as shown in recommendation C on the order paper, and remind them that every member of that group has the right to vote for any amount of allowance that they want, less than the amount that we vote through tonight. That is your choice. You have that in your control every day of every week, and you choose to take the full allowance. So you cannot blame us for you not taking the 20% reduction that you promised the electorate. Those poor and needy that are in Councillor Eggington's ward need that £66,000. You must do it. It's an honourable thing. You're honourable people. Do it. As I stated earlier, in total, the allowances, special responsibility allowances to the Labour Group cost about £78,000. So a 20% reduction would only amount to £15,000. It's a small degree of credibility, and even at this late stage of proceedings, we would accept an amendment from the Labour Group to reduce those proposed allowances by 20%. Do you wish to take that opportunity? If so, somebody stand. No, you don't. We could move it for them, but what we will do, the vote will be a recorded vote, and Conservative members will abstain. So the matter is for each Labour member to consider and decide tonight whether they're going to vote through these responsibility allowances at this rate or not. I move this motion.
Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm very happy to formally second and just draw members' attention to an interesting matter of detail. We've spent probably 20 minutes now debating what we're going to do about £66,000, £250,000 of funds that slosh around within the context of members' allowances. And then when we look at the general fund revenue budget, the thing that underpins what we are here to debate this evening, we see £106,585,306, money which is, for our residents, supporting services and at stake this evening. We've had very, very expert professionals, many of them, in fact, if not all of them, far more highly paid than any of the elected members in this chamber, working on this programme for a very long period of time. What happens within that budget is fundamental to the quality of life of our residents. And it seems to me that when we are looking at a comparison of over £106 million being spent on public services, on libraries, children's centres, supporting education, caring for the vulnerable elderly, making sure people get housed, ensuring the streets are cleaned, that bins are emptied, that recycling is provided, that young people get to where they need to go for their education. What do we have from the Labour Party? A fig leaf of an argument, quibbling over a small detail of members' allowances, but virtually nothing at all to say about the vast majority of the work that this council does. And I think that, Mr Mayor, may be a clue as to why it is, as Councillor Mills said, that the Conservatives are running Hillingdon and not the party opposite.
Are there any other speakers? No? So we move straight to the vote.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A recorded vote has been called for. Just to clarify, we're voting on recommendation small c at the top of page 3. Please indicate if you are voting for that motion as moved by Councillor Puddifoot, against or abstaining. Councillor Ahmad Walana. Councillor Birra. Councillor Bridges. Councillor Burles. Councillor Burrows. Councillor Chamdell, Councillor J. Cooper, Councillor Cawthorne, Councillor Crowe, Councillor Curling, Councillor Dan, Councillor Davis, Councillor Dennis, Councillor Deere, Councillor Dillon, Councillor Dott, Councillor Duducu, Councillor Duncan, Councillor East, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Edgington, Councillor Flynn, Councillor Fife, Councillor Gardner, thank you, Councillor Garg, Councillor Gillam, Councillor Graham, Councillor Hagger, Councillor Higgins, Councillor Jackson, Councillor Jajusi, Councillor Kaufman, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Katra, Councillor Kashid, Councillor Lachmana, Councillor Lavery, Councillor Lewis, Councillor Markham, Councillor Melvin, Councillor D. Mills, Councillor R. Mills, Councillor Money, Councillor Morgan, Councillor Morse, Councillor Nelson, Councillor O'Brien, Councillor Oswell, Councillor Palmer, Councillor Puddifoot, Councillor Sansapuri, Councillor Seaman Digby, Councillor Simmons, Councillor Singh, Councillor Stead, Councillor Sweeting, Councillor White, Councillor Yarrow, Mr. Mayor,
Not voting.
Mr. Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That motion is carried.
Right. So that motion is carried. That concludes item 5 on the agenda. We now move to item 6 on the agenda, the London Pensions Collective Investment Vehicle. Councillor Cawthorne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The local government pension scheme funds across the country are being asked to pool their assets, mainly on a regional basis, to deliver savings in fund management fees through economies of scale. This will deliver significant savings over time, as these fees are a considerable cost and ones over which funds have little control. London councils, working closely with London boroughs, have established a collective investment vehicle, which is set up as a sectoral joint committee. As a member of the CIV, I would stress that the Pensions Committee for the Hillingdon Fund would still retain control over both the investment strategy of the fund and asset allocation. However, investments made through the CIV will be managed through the sectoral joint committee rather than at local level. While other pools are being developed across the country, the London CIV is much more advanced and is the one in which Hillingdon would have the greatest say, as all boroughs have an equal voice in arrangements. I move the recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Simmons, you've indicated.
Mr. Mayor, I formally second and reserve my right.
Are there any other speakers? We move straight to the vote. All those in favour, would you kindly show? It looks like the motion is carried unanimously. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the suspension of Council Procedure Rule 14.4 to allow unlimited speaking time for the mover and seconder of the motion and the principal speaker and seconder of the principal amendment from the Labour Group.
Is that agreed? And sorry? Yes, seconder on that? Yes, lovely. You're seconding. Great. All in favour?
Mr. Mayor, on that point, on page 7, the order of business indicates that Councillor Edgington will move and Councillor Dillon will second the amendment. I believe that's an error and it should be Councillor Oswell. I apologise for that typographical error.
Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'm pleased to be standing here once again, delivering this administration's budget for the forthcoming financial year 2016-2017. It is a fact, however, that remains as true this year as every other year that I've delivered this speech, to say that delivering the speech is the easy bit, and it is constructing the budget that has been, is, and probably always will be the real challenge. However, this year, I had hoped that we might have received a little external help in preparing our budget, especially as we now have a newly discovered financial guru in the borough. Someone who has clearly been hiding his light under a bushel up until only recently. In case you can't guess to whom I'm referring, I am of course referring to the new Shadow Chancellor, who, being a local, I had thought this year might have offered us some pearls of wisdom on how to construct our budget. Perhaps fortunately for the residents of the borough, this help has not been forthcoming. At least not to us. But maybe his wise words will come to light in any amendment that comes forth from the other side later tonight. However, I am sure that we, on this side of the chamber, all fervently hope that should the unthinkable ever come to pass, and the MP for Hayes and Harlington comes to occupy number 11 Downing Street, he would seek our counsel in budgetary matters, and thus save the country from what would otherwise be certain ruin. Mr. Mayor, joking aside, although frankly the thought of him in number 11 is clearly not a joking matter, we have, as usual, constructed a robust, balanced, progressive budget that will continue to deliver on the promises we have made to our residents and provide the services that they have come to rely on and to keep us on the straight and narrow. Mr. Mayor, I can once more confirm that tonight the Council is in robust shape. What I have to tell you all is a good news story. One of investment, one of delivery, and one of services to our residents. Yet again, we have worked hard to streamline our processes and systems to make the savings needed to balance the books, and to do so without resorting to the closures and sackings and sell-offs so common in the boroughs around us. This time last year, Mr. Mayor, in my comments on the state of the nation, I professed a hope that the then Prime Minister might be returned to number 10 without his junior partners in tow at the then forthcoming general election. Even I couldn't have guessed just how good a night we would have on the 7th of May 2015. Not only did we see a Conservative victory on a scale no one forecast, but we also saw the end of a few careers too. I could mention the demise of Ed Balls, Vince Cable, or even Jim Murphy, the man who was going to save Scotland for the Labour Party, but I won't, for fear of sounding too triumphalist. Nonetheless, we are under no illusions that this great victory will mean an end to austerity, or an end to the need to pay down the huge debt bequeathed to us by the last Labour government. At a more local level, our neighbouring councils continue to cut services, increase charges, and generally fail to deliver for their residents. Good old Harrow, not content with a 1.99% increase in council tax last year, are increasing their tax this year by another 1.99%. On top of this, they are charging £75 extra per household for green waste collection. But they are not alone. In Hounslow, green waste collection will be charged at £50, and in Brent, £40. In fact, in Brent, Camden, Croydon, Enfield, Greenwich, Islington, Lambeth, Lewisham, Redbridge, Sutton, Tower Hamlets and Waltham Forest, they are all putting up their tax this year by 3.99%. I wonder if any of you have spotted the common theme with these boroughs. Yeah. Or perhaps you've noticed the odd one out. Yes, apart from Sutton, Lib Dem, they are all Labour run. And if that increase is not enough, all these boroughs are making swinging cuts or raising extra taxes through higher fees. Brent, for example, is closing day centres and asking volunteers to step forward. They are cutting their IT budget by 1.6 million at a time when IT might help them overcome some of their problems. They're even slashing the facility time allowed to trade unions. Can you imagine that? Across the piece, increased charges and reduced services, libraries closed and spending slashed and balances decimated. Last year, Mr Mayor, I offered you all a list of councils across the country laying waste to services, increasing charges and putting up their council tax, and frankly I could do the same again tonight. Last year I asked you for ideas of what these other councils might adopt as their motto in place of putting our residents first. Tonight you know what that answer should be. Last year I offered you an alternative vision to the apocalypse happening all around us. Tonight I have just lifted a lid on a sample of the destruction to services and provisions going in town halls all around the country. Last year I said we should rejoice at living in Hillingdon. Tonight I say the same thing. So would you like to know what we are going to do by comparison? Would you like to know how much our council tax is going up this year? Do you want to know which services we'll be cutting or libraries closing? Well, I'm here to tell you. Council tax, nil increase again. Now that makes 8 years for the mathematicians amongst us, 8 years on the trot for all residents, and 10 years now for the over 65s. And in their case, there is a continuing promise to them of no further increases until 2019, guaranteed. Now, what is so interesting about this continued series of nil points, as they might say, is that in real terms, taking inflation into account, what we have actually delivered to the residents and taxpayers of this borough is a significant cut, a real saving in hard cash that they might otherwise have had to spend on their council tax. At Band D, the cumulative saving made by each and every council taxpayer over the 8 years in this borough amounts to £864. And for the over 65s, at the same Band D, the cumulative saving over 10 years is a staggering £1,375, which is more than the Band D tax itself for the over 65s. Now let me repeat this because it's important. At Band D, for average taxpayers, the saving is £864, and for the over 65s, the saving has been £1,375. Now, it can't get better than that, I hear you say, but it does. Not only have we delivered these savings to our residents, but we are once again in a position to deliver a reduction in the overall doorstep bill, thanks to the continuing frugality of the Mayor of London and the GLA, who has once again reduced their tax take, this year by 7.5% or £19 at Band D. And if that isn't a reason enough to vote for Zach Goldsmith and Dominic Gillam on the 5th of May, then I don't know what is. So to the details. Over the next few minutes I will outline a number of our plans for the year ahead, and then I know that the leader, deputy leader and many of my fellow cabinet members will fill in some more details when they speak later on. It goes without saying that in order to create a balanced budget, it is necessary to look at both expenditure and income, and then at the savings needed to close any gap. This year's settlement received from central government was, surprise, surprise, a tough one. In December, we expected a budget gap to be about 14 million. By early February, it became clear that the government had chosen to front-load a number of funding reductions, such that the gap has increased to virtually 20 million. In many councils, such a dramatic negative change would have, and probably did, send them into meltdown. In Hillingdon, we just revised our budgets and closed the gap. After all, last year we needed to make savings of 10 million and did so why not nearly 20 this year? The details of the savings are all set out in the budget report, along with all the other details, on 245 carefully crafted pages of text, which I'm sure you have all read. What you really need to know, and what our residents need to be told, is that we will continue to fully fund all the services we have promised to deliver. Oh, and by the way, the answer to the question I posed earlier, there are no cuts to services in this budget, nor libraries closed. Furthermore, I can add that as a council, when we do charge for extra services, we will never charge more than 90% of what our neighbouring councils charge, whether that's for enrolment in a music service or for any of our crematorium charges, or the myriad of things in between. As usual, we will make allowances for inflation, and as usual, we will provide a development and risk contingency fund as a buffer against known and unknown items of expenditure, this year increased in size to 18 million. It is worth noting that in all the years we have run a contingency fund, not once have we come close to spending it all, leaving as a result a further buffer available for the following year. So just as others are cutting, what are we adding to our budget this year? Well, we have 1.114 million of priority growth funding for new projects. Some of these projects have been identified, while others will be identified during the course of the year. Those already identified include 50,000 towards the running costs of the first of the 3 new youth centres we are committed to build, 140,000 to fund a curator and assistant for our new museum and the RAF bunker site on St Andrew's Park, an additional £100,000 to support planning enforcement, 40,000 for environmental enforcement, 25,000 to support carers, and 25,000 towards domestic violence prevention. However, these additions are just the beginning. Our capital programme is where the real action is to be found. As was true last year, so it remains true this year. We will continue to invest in our schools to meet the rising demand for places. This programme is the largest school building project in London, with an anticipated spend of 140 million on primary school places now coming towards an end, and now to be followed with an equally significant investment in the secondary sector. This year we will invest some 10 million in the primary sector and 37 million in the secondary sector. As I have said before, every Hillingdon child will have a proper school place when they need one in a modern, well-equipped school. That is our commitment. This year we will invest in our heritage and civic pride, with £800,000 for the repair of the listed gatehouse at Uxbridge Cemetery, 1.6 million in our new Borough Museum on St Andrew's Park, and also 5 million as the first instalment on our new theatre project, also on St Andrew's Park. This new museum, and next to it the new theatre, which will be built over the next 2 or so years, will become a statement of our commitment, not just to provide the basic services that we know our residents expect, but also as a beacon of our commitment to the arts in this borough. We will invest 2 million in our youth centre project, building the first of 3 additional new centres. We will spend 2.5 million on refurbishing Hayes Town Centre. Yes, that's Hayes Town Centre, the town situated in the south of the borough. 750,000 will be spent on shopfront grants, 1 million on a dementia centre, more than 250,000 on car parking resurfacing, work on the RAGC, the Rural Activities Garden Centre, 700,000 on refurbishing our bowls clubs, 300,000 on improving our telecare services for the elderly, 195,000 on further CCTV cameras, 300,000 on ICT, 1.3 million for new vehicles, and 750,000 for Hillingdon sports and leisure facilities, and many more projects as well. Last but definitely not least, we will invest 5.3 million over 2 years to replace all our street lamps, all 23,900 of our street lamps, with these LED lights, just like this one, only a bit bigger. This is not only... You see how bright it is, isn't it good? Show it to the camera. Yes. Not only is this an environmentally friendly investment, but one which we will calculate saves us 800,000 per annum, or will do when it's fully up and running, in running costs once completed. All this and we will continue to invest £1 million in the Chrysalis programme, provide money for burglar alarms for the over 65s, more money for road resurfacing, and an extra £1 million for pavement resurfacing too. Mr. Mayor, these investments will benefit the residents of this borough and be the envy of residents in all the surrounding boroughs. Yeah. Moving on. One area that I have not yet touched on so far tonight is the housing budget. Both the housing revenue account and the HRA capital programme form part of the Council's overall budget provision, and they too are worthy of some comment. The housing revenue account has been self-financing for the last 5 years and is ring-fenced from the Council's other budgets. This year the proposed budget will reflect a 1% reduction in rents in line with government policy. The HRA budget for this year will be £61.9 million, and the HRA capital programme for the 5-year term up to 2020-21 reflects anticipated investment of £46 million in housing stock and £84 million to fund the delivery of 452 new homes. Mr. Mayor, I have outlined a very comprehensive programme that this Conservative Council will deliver over the next 12 months. It is both challenging and exciting. We will be providing our residents with not only the many services they have come to expect from us, but also investing significantly in the future for the benefit of generations still growing up and those yet to come, with our investment in new schools, our new museum, youth centres and a brand new state-of-the-art theatre. Mr. Mayor, these are not the actions of a council on the run. These are the actions of a council that is well run, well financed and putting our residents first. Yeah. Mr. Mayor, this budget was not thrown together on the back of an envelope, as others may later tonight prove to be, but instead is the result of a significant amount of very detailed work over very many weeks and months. For this, my thanks, and I believe all the Council's thanks, is due both to the Director of Finance and his staff, but most particularly to the Leader of the Council, without whom we would not be in the place we are now. Mr. Mayor, in closing, I would direct you and all members of the Council to the 17 recommendations set out on pages 4 to 7 of the green sheets, which I now formally move and rest our case. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder?
Mr. Mayor, I second and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Eggington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move an amendment to these proposals. The amendments are as detailed on pages 8 and 9 of the order paper. First of all, I would like to acknowledge our thanks of the Labour group, this is, for the officers who have assisted with regard to our calculations. It's not just the officers in the finance directorship, but also those throughout the council, because they've all been involved building up the budget over the last 12 months. And I think that the council as a whole should acknowledge their importance. And also to my colleagues who have helped in making these proposals and assessing the figures. In summary, this council, as with all local authorities, is suffering from local government cuts. Councillor Bianco didn't actually mention that, but central government has had the advantage of using local government as an easy target for cuts in its austerity programme. There have been also some matters which I don't think Councillor Bianco really addressed, and that is the increased demand for social care and various other services which the council provides. And these really, I don't think, are included sufficiently within the proposals. However, we have had assurance from officers that the funding which is available will be sufficient to cover those services, and therefore, as a group, we are willing to accept those proposals. Can I just mention that at the last council meeting, we voted against the change to the council tax reduction scheme. It is certainly not true that every household will not have to pay higher council tax. Any household which has a vulnerable working age resident, or indeed is financially stressed, will be paying more, and potentially 25% more council tax than they did last year. So, when it says in, for example, Hillingdon People, that there's no increase in council tax, that's not entirely true, because at least 10%, maybe 15% of the households in Hillingdon will be paying more. Additionally, anybody who has a second home in Hillingdon will be paying more. No, not in France. No, we don't pay council tax in France. But in Hillingdon they will. Now you will recall that this time last year, the Labour group suggested that that exemption should be withdrawn. And Councillor Bianco, I remember, at length explained why that was a bad idea. I'm glad to see that he's come round to our way of thinking. Now, the main reason for us becoming elected members is to help people. And for most of us, it's really, we are seeking to help those who are most in need. And I hope that is something which is shared by us all here. Hillingdon has actually been levying one of the highest council tax bills in Outer London. And neighbouring boroughs have also not always increased their council tax. For example, Ealing Council has lower council tax, and indeed is not intending to increase its council tax. For those who heard the Today programme on Monday, Councillor Bell indicated that the reason why Ealing is not required or doesn't need to increase its council tax is because of being able to generate more council tax with more residential properties and more commercial development. Very similar to us. And the need is therefore not as acute in terms of collecting additional income. We have to remember that both Heathrow and Crossrail are the main drivers of additional income and extra resources. And therefore, it's not entirely true to say just because Hillingdon is in a financially stable position, it is entirely down to the administration. Hillingdon is lucky in some ways to have Heathrow and lucky to have Crossrail. Having said that, Mr. Mayor, the importance is that there are environmental impacts of that airport and also Northolt, and we need really to consider ways in which we can mitigate some of those problems. Now, over the last 5 years, the lowest hanging fruit has effectively been grass. We've been able to make cuts from the relatively easy approaches. But those are now getting much more difficult. And it's really difficult, from having spoken to officers, to see that they will be able to make further cuts without services being reduced dramatically. And it's not difficult to find examples. Mention was made by Councillor Bianco about young people's centres. And although we have more young people's centres than we had previously, In fact, a number of sessions offered has actually been reduced. In one case, which I know, it's been reduced to a quarter of what it was. So there were 4 sessions a week, there's now just 1. And inevitably, that means that young people and children are more likely to be hanging around, making mischief, and being a nuisance to local residents. We may be spending more money to build new centres, but unless we ensure they're actually providing the services, it's a wasted investment. We need to ensure that revenue expenditure is also maintained. And only this week we've heard reports of cuts to grants to the arts in Hillingdon. Although I believe the amounts are relatively modest, these grants have provided support and encouragement to local people. They've also enhanced the local vibrancy of the borough. But it is perhaps ironic that at the very time the council is talking about spending £43 million on a new theatre, we're also cutting the grants to individual arts organisations. So Labour as a whole will be seeking to fight such cuts. As I say, we pledge to raise issues about cuts which occur this coming year, but we have accepted the assurances from officers that, providing there are no cuts to frontline services, we will go along with the budget. Now, when you're ready, I've got all night, I hope you have. Now, dealing with some of the proposals. My colleagues will speak about some of these in more detail, but principally, you will see the first one relates to children's centres. There have been a number of proposals to cut the funding. The idea of a universal and comprehensive service to support young families is something which I hope we all will endorse. Every mother can benefit from advice about maternal health, medical matters, employment and mothering. And this helps all families because often even financially comfortable households may not be living close to relatives. Obtaining clear and accurate information is crucial to support all families. And the intention to reduce and change the, quote, delivery model should at least wait until the effects on the service have been predetermined. Next, Hillingdon people. We are keen to reduce the number of issues in line with the guidelines from the Department for Communities and Local Government. There may be a small saving in cash terms and a saving of the biased articles and headlines. I only need to refer to the headline which says there's no increase in council tax for all households. It isn't true. I can give you 10,000 families, households, who would be paying more council tax. You say all, I say some. And then we'll be going into music.
Would you, excuse me, Councillor Eglinton, would you please allow Councillor Eglinton to have his say? He is equally entitled to his opinion as you are.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm trying to rein in most of my opinions, but anyway. And then, housing. Housing in London is perhaps the biggest issue. For those who would like to buy property, notwithstanding the joint ownership models, only a very small proportion of young people can even hope to save for a deposit, let alone afford a mortgage, especially if interest rates might rise. But with the right to buy and the new proposals to force local authorities to sell more valuable properties as they become empty, I foresee a perfect storm. The fact is that unless we can attract staff to help out in our hospitals and schools, it is going to be really difficult. And the lack of housing encourages the overcrowding of existing properties. Our proposals will allow for an additional 400 homes to be provided for local families. It's only a small start, but it is a start. It will encourage young people to stay in Hillingdon instead of having to move away, sometimes still working here but being forced to commute. So, Mr. Mayor, that is the basis of our proposals. Modest they may be, but they are fairer and they are supporting the communities which elected us. Thank you.
Right. I've now asked the Head of Democratic Services to make an observation on the recommendation.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, just for clarification purposes, obviously, members, the one that you didn't mention is the reduction in special responsibility allowance for Cabinet members by 20%. Obviously, that now can't be part of your amendment because that was voted down earlier in the meeting. Can you clarify, is that going to remain, or are you finding that 66? I just think for clarification.
I think Mr. Mayor, he's missed the opportunity. He's moved the amendment, and that's it's illegal. He can't have it. He moved the amendment. He's missed it.
Sorry,
Just to clarify, Mr. Mayor, there is no amendment until it's been seconded, so there is a point of clarification so everybody understands what we're debating. So that is removed from your proposed amendment, as you didn't.
Councillor Barrett.
yes. So, yes, remove the special responsibility allowance, reduction of £66,000 and increase the reduced price
So you're moving it from one pot to another, in essence. Is there a seconder? Councillor Oswald?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I formally second and reserve my right.
Okay.
Can I just Mr. Mayor, we've had a number of other people put their hands up indicating to speak, but however, we are now debating the amendment as set out on pages 8 and 9, as just clarified. So anybody who's previously indicated, you will need to indicate again if you wish to speak on the amendment.
Councillor Cawthorne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We will not be supporting the amendment before us this evening. I will deal with the housing aspect, and my colleagues will deal with other aspects as we progress. I want to make the point, Mr. Mayor, that this is almost identical to what the Labour Group put forward last year, as is our response to it. In fact, I was able to print off my speech, dust it off, and tweak it a little bit.
Here it is again.
Change the figures to a certain extent, and it's more or less the same. I will therefore try and be brief, because I think there are some points that are worth saying once again. I do think it betrays a complete lack of understanding of how the process to identify opportunities and develop proposals for affordable housing works, and clearly they have difficulty in learning that, which is a real shame. I would repeat, there are ambitious capital investment plans in the HRA, in the budget report. These set out the planned delivery of 452 new homes, including the construction or purchase of homes for general housing needs, as well as supported housing. And that's only what we're doing. Our programme also complements a wider pipeline programme on affordable housing delivered by partners on various sites across the borough, such as St Andrews Park, and from planning obligations. The amendment looks towards further financial capacity within the HRA to fund further units, principally from using borrowing headroom and HRA balances, but does not set out how or where they would be built. Mr. Mayor, I repeat what I said last year. Increasing the capital investment plans without having any idea of where they would or could be built and who would build them just presents a false picture of what is achievable. Mr. Mayor, why do socialists always think they can just make things happen by decree and everything will then dutifully fall into place? Mr. Mayor, the world that I live in and most of us live in just doesn't work like that, I'm afraid. However, as opportunities emerge that take the potential beyond the existing 452 units, and we look at this on a regular basis, then we can of course add to the MTFF as there is funding within the balances and borrowing headroom to do so. A serious opposition would make use of the opportunity afforded by the POC process to ask questions of officers to formulate properly informed proposals. The proposals, if approved, would not make one iota of difference to our situation, and as it stands, once again, this really is gesture politics and a sad reflection of what passes for opposition in Hillingdon. We oppose the amendment. Thank you.
I'm next going to call Councillor Sweeting, followed by Councillor Simmons. Councillor Sweeting.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I speak in support of the amendment regarding children's centre budgets. It is with considerable concern that this council has decided that the children, young people and learning service area should take the brunt of the cuts, being over 3.5 million. This means that the council will be cutting considerable funds from such areas as early intervention and children's centres, therefore not, I repeat, not fully funding all the services this council is delivering. You will all know that Hillingdon has a poor record in its schools achieving good results, as is evidenced by last week's report to Cabinet. It has produced results at foundation stage which were behind all other London boroughs, and this pattern seems to continue. There are many reasons why results are poor. Some are not to be found within the gates of our schools, but in the wider community served by this council. We are indeed a borough of great extremes, with some areas being in the bottom 20% nationally in respect to audits of deprivation and poverty, a 215 statistic. So it is very hard to understand how cuts to children's centres will not impact very adversely on our most vulnerable families. Moreover, reducing support to this age range seems to be at odds with evidence within the recent major review, which highlighted that, and I quote, allocation of funding to individual children's centres within a locality will not necessarily reflect the needs of the population it serves. By investing fully in children's centres, you will indeed be investing wisely. For as was stated in the background to this review, early intervention is particularly important, as it is best to prevent problems from developing in the first place. The consequences of not doing this are increasing demands on more complex services and a greater use of resources. Hitting the budgets of children's centres and reviewing their structures will mean that you may well be hitting centres which are at the lifeline of improving life chances for many children. Some children's centres are already very stretched. By cutting budgets, some work will just not be possible. These children currently being supported will probably be those to be reported under the underachieving at foundation stage. In conclusion, reversing these cuts is likely to go down very well with the Prime Minister's family, who have condemned budget cuts to children's centres in Oxfordshire. So a second thought from this council is likely to be applauded by Mrs Cameron Senior as well as David Cameron's aunt.
Councillor Simmons, followed by Councillor Sansapuri.
Well, Mr Mayor, Mrs Cameron Senior, I'm sure, would have some observations to make about the sartorial picture that we see when we look across the chamber, but I'm not sure that her remarks in relation to Oxfordshire have any particular relevance to the debate that we're having tonight about the budget. I've got to say, I don't think really Councillor Sweeting has much of a grip on the issues that she's talking about. It's fairly typical of the Labour Party recently to be making mischief, as Councillor Edgerton says our young people do. The Labour Party is making mischief around the issue of children's centres, and they've become something of a totem. Anything that is taken away from the budget must by definition be bad, and children's centres themselves must always be good. Well, I've been visiting our children's centres recently, and it's been an interesting experience because what we see is very much the kind of pattern that you find in any service that is provided. Some of our children's centres are extremely busy, others, frankly, are not particularly busy. Some of them are doing a marvellous job at reaching those most in need. Others are struggling to do that effectively. And a simple example of one of the things that we can do that can improve that is sharing the management. So we have arrangements already in place at two of our children's centres very near to this council civic centre, where shared management is bringing about a much more effective arrangement for getting out and serving the needs of the more deprived communities. But one of the big benefits of shared management, of course, is that it saves money. And that is why, when we look at what is being proposed, we are saying that there will be a zero-based budget review and that we will look at the delivery model. Because we know there are things that we can do more efficiently. There are things that we've done more efficiently in our libraries that have enabled us to extend the opening hours, to see more books being issued, to see more people using those services. There are things that we can do by looking at the way that we manage our adult social care that makes those resources go further so more people can be served. There are lots of things that we can do as a council that will stretch the available resources that we have to go further and that will enable us to do things more efficiently. And no area of what this council does should ever be exempt from that consideration. We must always be looking to see, are there things that we can do to save money? Because there is no excuse for whatever for spending more than we need to on some services and robbing residents who depend on other services in order to make that possible. And children's centres need to be subject to exactly the same financial discipline as any other part of the organisation.
Councillor Sansbury, followed by Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I strongly believe that publication of our news sheet, Hillingdon People, which occurs every 2 months, is more than actually required. And it also breaches the rule that those news sheets should be published no more frequently than quarterly. Mr. Mayor, I do recognize that the importance of Hillingdon People and fully aware that it gives views of elected member of our council and also council service to the residents, which are good for healthy democracy. But we can achieve this easily by publishing 4 times a year instead of 6. We can kill 2 birds by one stone by reducing its publication. Firstly, we will be able to meet the government guidelines on the subject, and secondly, save substantial amount of money which can be used to achieve our aims of resident first. Mr. Mayor, I also support amendment to reduce cabinet member allowances. We should never forget that we are public servants and people see us as a role model and watch all our activity very closely. The vast majority of general public believe that these allowances are too high. And if we always feel proud by making cuts or saving, which we normally say here, on all other areas, why we can't make saving here and send a good message to our residents? Mr. Mayor, I support this amendment.
Councillor Puddifoot, followed by Councillor Curling.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just before, I'm sure the Leader of the Council is aware, but just for clarification, this is not your unlimited speaking time, this is 3 minutes because it's on the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This amendment is lamentable. As we've said, it's not the back of an envelope, it's the back of a fag packet exercise, and clearly shows the gulf that exists between us as regards financial management. But Councillor Eggington mentioned the People's Republic of Ealing and suggested that they are freezing their tax, and they certainly are. But with a £60 charge for green waste collection, it's equivalent to 4% on the council tax at the rate they charge, which is £22 a year lower than ours, but with that £60 you can work it out yourself, Councillor Eggington, I'm sure. The same applies to Hounslow, and I wouldn't even mention Harrow. You don't want to go there. The inability to accept that statutory services can be run in a business-like, efficient manner is something that is so ingrained in the Labour group, they just would not be able to cope with the responsibilities of administration. This budget contains £13.3 million in savings proposals. There is no real challenge to anything. They pick out 2 with the word children in the title, totalling £415,000 in a bid to tug heartstrings rather than look at reality. As regards the Labour Group's attempt to deal with a £13.3 million savings target, what initiatives do they have? Save £35,000 by cutting 2 editions of Hillingdon People and £66,000 by reducing cabinet member allowance. A grand total of £101,000 against £13.3 million target. That is pitiful. You'd really be better off saying nothing. Councillor Cawthorne has dealt with the proposed amendments to the HRA, and in fairness to the opposition, they have no experience of running the modernised council, as they've been in opposition for so long. So just let's say, yes, we could borrow £57 million. We have a borrowing capacity of £67.7 million in the HRA, as we've significantly paid down earlier debt and effectively raised our borrowing limit should we want to use it. But Mr Mayor, we simply would not progress on such ridiculously flimsy information and no proper business case. We've not achieved all that we have in Hillingdon by adopting such an approach. I've begun to appreciate how much the Labour group are missing the presence of Councillor Paul Harmsworth. But I have to say, 1 out of 10 for turning up and saying something, Councillor Eggington, but honestly, I'm marking you higher than I should.
Councillor Curling.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Bianco started his speech. I'm speaking on the amendment, by the way, but Councillor Bianco started his speech by sort of congratulating David Cameron for being re-elected to number 10 Downing Street. And I'm afraid what we're seeing here is nothing more than the return of the nasty party, and it's the really nasty party, where the council is being put in an impossible situation, and I think congratulations has to go to the officers for a marvellous job they do under the circumstances. But the central Tory government are putting all councils in a insidious position, and Oxford is relevant because I'm sure the Tory group in Oxfordshire were hoping for Mr Cameron to get back into number 10 Downing Street as well. But I mean, earlier on in some of the debates, we had mentions of the Labour group either lying or being incompetent. Well, when the Tory administration talk of freezing council tax for everyone, but by the back door raise it by 5% for those who are on benefits and some of the poorest and more vulnerable in our society. Is that a lie, I wonder, or is that incompetence? I don't know. And I think today, I'm disgusted really standing here today. having the cameras on must have done something to the party opposite, because I mean, we started off with an apology. I mean, fair enough, it was an apology, but it was a very joking, some might say a perfunctory apology. And that sort of led into this rather nasty debate that has gone on. Members opposite attacking us personally across the floor rather than going through the Mayor, which I think shows disrespect to the Mayor more than anything, or the Mayor's office. I just think we're in a really poor situation here in Hillingdon. We've got some good amendments, I mean, limited, because the situation we're in, things are limited. So, I mean, the party opposite could redeem some of their sort of poor behaviour today by voting in favour of our amendments. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
I note your comments about the respect to the mayoralty. Interesting one. I have no other people have indicated, so we move to the seconder of the amendment. Councillor Oswald, do you wish to speak now?
John? Unlimited speaking, as you reserved your right, and you are the principal seconder of the principal amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. No, I don't think I've got anything further to say. My colleagues have spoken splendidly, so I think we'll leave it there. And I thought we were always sartorial over here. Who said that?
Councillor Bianco, do you wish to make any observations on the amendment?
No, I really don't think they're necessary.
Councillor Eggington, you are the mover of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, really, just to sum up, okay, they are relatively modest proposals. Being in opposition, we don't have the same facilities. We don't have the officers supporting us as much as perhaps other people do. But nevertheless, these are serious proposals. They are things which will help our residents, and they shouldn't just be dismissed out of hand and then personal attacks made. So I would ask councillors to support this amendment. Thank you.
Right. We now move to the vote on the amendment. So all those...
Mr Mayor, as members may be aware, under the Local Authority Standing Order Regulations 2014, we have to have, by law, recorded votes on any motion or amendment or substantive motions to do with the budget. So I will be calling in the same manner as before. Please indicate whether you're voting for the amendment as printed on pages 8 and 9 of the Order of Business, subject to the amendment of the deletion of the 66,000 for the reduction in special responsibility allowance and the increase in the reduced unallocated priority growth to 380. Please indicate if you are voting for that amendment or against it. Councillor Ahmad Walana. Councillor Allen. Councillor Barnes. Councillor Bianco. Councillor Birra. Councillor Bridges. Councillor Burles. Councillor Burrows. Councillor Chamdell. Councillor J. Cooper. Councillor Cawthorne. Councillor Crowe. Councillor Curling. Councillor Dan. Councillor Davis. Councillor Dennis. Councillor Deere. Councillor Dillon. Councillor Dott. Councillor Deducci. Councillor Duncan. Councillor East. Councillor Edwards. Councillor Edgington. Councillor Flynn. Councillor Fife. Councillor Gardner, who's gone. Councillor Garg. Councillor Gillam. Thank you. Councillor Graham. Councillor Hagger. Councillor Higgins. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Judgeusi. Councillor Kaufman. Councillor Kelly. Councillor Katra. Councillor Kashid. Councillor Lakmana. Councillor Lavery. Councillor Lewis. Councillor Markham. Councillor Melvin. Councillor D. Mills. Councillor R. Mills. Councillor Money. Councillor Morgan. Councillor Morse. Councillor Nelson. Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Oswell. Councillor Palmer. Councillor Puddifoot. Councillor Sansapuri. Councillor Seaman Digby. Councillor Simmons. Councillor Singh. Councillor Stead. Councillor Sweeting. Councillor White. Councillor Yarrow. Mr Mayor. Mr Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Mr Mayor. That amendment is lost. We now revert back to the original motion, and I think we only had one extra speaker on that, which was Councillor Cawthorne at this stage.
Councillor Cawthorne, followed by Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. From an adult services perspective, to make some additional comments to what's already been said about my portfolio by Councillor Bianco, I would add that prevention is a very strong theme in the budget report. This is by no means new and has been central to the work to deliver better outcomes for residents and generate savings for a number of years now, and this will continue in 16-17 in a number of ways. Supported living significantly improves people's quality of life, as does extra care housing, helping older people to maintain their own tenancies with appropriate support around them, with projected increases in the number of both of these over the coming year. Intensive reablement continues to play a central role in helping to maximise independence and has helped 169 more residents remain in their own homes over the last year, complemented by telecare, which over the same period has begun to serve an additional 427 residents. Mr Mayor, in the year ahead, we will also see an increased impetus in improving service provision for residents with health partners through the Health and Wellbeing Board and the Better Care Fund. This includes preventative work, particularly for people at risk of falls or having a stroke. Another key feature is improving preventative services to care homes, from which a disproportionately high number of people are admitted to hospital, as well as safe discharges from hospital. But of course, prevention goes beyond these more obvious examples to much else across the spectrum of council activity. And without wanting to encroach too far upon the areas of other Cabinet colleagues, I will just say that the work to improve parks and green spaces, the host of activities accessible in our libraries, work to improve our bowling greens and our leisure facilities, the arts activities, the tea dances, the dining centres, and the support and befriending services through local partners and the self-help groups. All of these things, in their own way, play a crucial part in helping us to tackle social isolation among the elderly and vulnerable, which, as we know, increases the risk of mental health and ill health problems. Finally, I would take this opportunity to record my thanks to staff for their work in taking forward service delivery in what is undoubtedly a difficult financial climate. I'm delighted to support the budget motion. Thank you.
Councillor Simmons.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of pieces of context, I think. We shouldn't forget, of course, that one of the reasons why all these councils are faced with difficult decisions is that our country is still reeling under a mountain of debt that was left by Gordon Brown. And I know John McDonnell, I'm sure, has some...
Could you please allow Councillor Simmons to speak? Councillor Sweeting. Councillor Sweeting, will you please restrain yourself? Would you allow Councillor Simmons to speak without interruption, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm grateful you're protecting me from being wounded by such personal attacks. The deficit that was, of course, left by Gordon Brown, by Tony Blair, remains with us to this day, and whilst strides are being made to reducing the impact that that has, it remains very much with us. And I'm sure, surprised, in fact, we haven't had a copy of the Little Red Book thrown at the Leader of the Council during the course of this budget debate in the hope that we might find some solutions in there. But a key other piece of context, of course, is that councils are not created equal. We know that Hillingdon has been subject to around a 65% reduction in the external funding that it receives. And although we don't suffer as much pressure as some councils in some parts of the country, it is very noticeable that those parts of inner London, and indeed councils like Ealing, enjoy a relatively favourable financial position. But one of the reasons why such progress has been made, and I think we have to reflect on what that looks like over a period of time, is that we do have a sophisticated approach in Hillingdon to the financial management of the council. And for that I do have to pay tribute to the Director of Finance and his team. I spend quite a lot of time visiting other councils, and the sophistication and the effectiveness of the financial management that happens here, the grip that our officers and indeed our leader and other members have on it, is far greater than you see in many authorities. And that means that money in Hillingdon, the Hillingdon pound, goes a bit further than the Ealing pound, or indeed the Hounslow pound, the Harrow pound. But let's turn to the specifics of what's in this budget tonight. Yep, we do face some quite difficult times, and much of that 65% reduction that's hit Hillingdon is money that's come out of central government funding for children's services and things like children's centres and support for schools. But a bright spot, I think, is that our schools budget, which is not something over which we have direct decision-making power, sees a rise of 1.75% this year. So a rise of 1.75 against a reduction of 65% in what's been coming into the council. Now, that has two angles. One, it means, of course, that our schools are in a much more favourable position in order to make progress. But we also need to recognise that much of the funding that used to come to Hillingdon to provide these activities has been transferred into those schools' budgets. So the way that we will deal with this, as we've continued to in recent years, is to challenge them and to say to some of those head teachers on salaries in excess of £200,000 a year, you are in control of what happens in your school. You will be challenged for what you do on behalf of the community that you serve inside and outside the school gates with that money. And in conclusion, Mr. Mayor, the thing that seems to me the Hillingdon difference is that elected members in this administration are prepared to treat this council as if it were a business. Not our business. We don't get bonuses because the council is more financially successful. But our residents are our shareholders.
Would you wind up, please? Councillor Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, 2 years ago, the residents of Hillingdon voted for a majority Conservative council and put their trust in a Conservative administration. And this budget shows that the trust has not been let down. We're continuing to invest in so many areas of this borough without any loss to services. We still keep weekly refuse and recycling collections with our single bag approach. Unlike at a recent meeting I attended, other councils were arguing over what colour their various bins should be for their residents, which we've heard they're now charging even more for. We're upgrading the street lighting, which, as we heard, will save this borough a substantial amount of money over the coming years. We're investing still in our roads and pavements and keeping parking fees favourable for our residents. But for me, Mr Mayor, and my commitment to safer roads, we're investing in CCTV outside our schools. Not as money earners before anybody jumps on that one, but to ensure the areas outside schools are kept clear and safe for the children that attend them. And I'm so pleased we are taking this initiative forward, as every time I go into a school and meet the junior road safety officers and other pupils, they always ask, what can the council do to help with such parking? Well, this is a clear message to the schools. We've heard you and we are taking action on what you have said. I could go on, Mr Mayor, but I won't. So on a final note, before I finish, I just want to congratulate my Cabinet colleague on the 245-page budget he has delivered this evening, yet again, and not a fag packet one like that moved by the group opposite. But most importantly, thanks must go to the leader of the council, whose drive and commitment to getting the best for the residents of this borough has allowed us as Cabinet members and as a Conservative administration to deliver yet again a fantastic budget that clearly proves Hillingdon Conservatives really do put residents first. I support this budget.
Councillor Seaman Digby.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My speech is on my phone, so apologies. I wish to briefly welcome this budget, another brilliant piece of work by the leader, Councillor Bianco, and not least by the officer corps here at the council who have supported them. Rather than the vagaries that have been offered from the other side, it's got concrete and costed actions which will continue to invest and improve our residents' lives. I think, find it gravely offensive about the comments of how easy things have been over the past few years to find savings. I'm not, however, allowed to use the language I'd like to address that claim, not least as my mother's watching, and she's just texted me. So, hello, Mummy. I will, however, focus and congratulate the officers within central services, the unsung heroes I always talk about, who touch every single part of the lives of this council and all of the frontline services that we offer. They're excellent at challenging and delivering more for less, looking under those dark corners, shining a light and finding ways of delivering services better, not cutting things, doing it more efficiently, like Councillor Simmons says, as a business. Across the breadth of the council, our central services teams touch every part of what we do. From the continued cabinet reports that show savings and improvements, to the ongoing development of apprentices across the organisation, the renewed focus on procurement, and you see it all through this budget here about procurement delivering X, Y and Z, to the general empowerment we've given and encouragement to our staff to engage in the HIP process. So all across Team Hillingdon, people are looking for solutions, better solutions, to find ways of investing in our council. This budget shows that our teams will continue to lead in embracing new technology and new ideas and new ways of doing things in a better basis for our residents, and I welcome it and recommend it.
Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is indeed a good news budget, as Councillor Bianco said. This administration has a record for sound financial management and putting residents first. The freezing of council tax for 8 years would be a remarkable achievement in itself, but set against the rising population of Hillingdon, the cuts necessary from central government to deal with the Labour mess, and the maintenance and improvement of services, it becomes even more remarkable. And as a reminder, we have not only had the programme over recent years to improve our leisure centres, maintain our libraries, develop our heritage sites, and of course the substantial school building programme, all of which have been arranged by this administration. Residents will also continue to welcome the continued spend on roads and pavements, certainly an issue which fills my ward inbox. And this is certainly not the case in the neighbouring Labour boroughs of Ealing and Harrow. As you go over the border, you can spot where the potholes start. I do represent a ward which is largely residential, but has in its heart 3 large connected green spaces, which of course already have a green flag. But my residents will welcome even more the commitment in this year's budget for a £250,000 a year for 5 years spend on parks, which of course is in addition to the chrysalis funds that are already available and for which we have seen benefit in the tennis courts of Cavendish and of course the work to the bowling club. So therefore, Mr Mayor, I am delighted to support this budget.
Councillor Gillam.
Mr Mayor, sound financial management, long-term economic plan. These phrases aren't just mere words, and their importance cannot be stressed enough. These words allow us to deliver on all the services that others struggle to maintain. The thorough planning and drafting of this budget by Councillor Bianco shouldn't be ignored, and he should be congratulated for the work that he has done for many years in his role to make sure that Hillingdon again can deliver a frozen council tax.
Yeah.
Working obviously in conjunction with our leader, carrying out this process, the residents of Hillingdon benefit. They benefit from a frozen council tax for 8 years. Oh, and by the way, those 8 years in City Hall, we've had a Conservative mayor as well, so they benefited in City Hall, where the GLA is based, I understand. Now, they also benefit from leisure centres, young people's centres, the largest school expansion programme in the capital, all while freezing the tax. Now, a few socialist boroughs may or not, that I may or may not have been to recently, if I pick one. Say I pick Ealing, for example. I could probably talk about Ealing. We've mentioned already that they have a green recycling scheme that has gone up. It's now £60 a year. The leader is right, it's £60. It's gone up by 50% this year. 50% increase on the waste and recycling for a fortnightly collection in Hillingdon. We do not charge extra and we do it weekly.
Yeah.
Now, the difference is in Hillingdon, we do efficiencies, not cuts. It's very important to recognise that. We don't touch frontline services like, say, Ealing, for example, who have just recently voted to close a respite care centre. They're consulting on closing community centres, but they didn't consult on all their waste and recycling going fortnightly. That's the difference. Efficiencies, cuts, and we consult, and we always put our residents first. So, as Conservatives, Mr Mayor, we continually strive for a better and better services for our residents that have given us the privilege to sit here or stand here tonight and make these multi-million-pound decisions on their behalf. Mr Mayor, it's frankly shameful that the Labour group and their counterparts at City Hall have nothing to offer that will benefit our residents. Have they been just scratching their heads for the last year or just watching training videos? Mr Mayor, I support this budget.
Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to welcome all of those who are sitting in the public gallery, especially the students from Brunel. Welcome. This is the most interesting and important council meeting of the year. Some people may find this debate over accounts and finances sterile, but without this hefty document here, we would not be able to do all the good things that Hillingdon does. Without this hefty document, we would not be able to spend £5 million on a brand new theatre, spend over £1 million on a Battle of Britain museum, build 3 new youth centres across the borough, regenerate our high streets, plus put aside almost £500,000 to help our residents fight against environmental vandalism of the third runway at Heathrow and HS2. How is Hillingdon able to continue investing in its people, infrastructure and heritage when many councils around us are having to close facilities and raise taxes? It's because for a long time this council's leadership has known that the better you manage your finances, the more good things you can do for your residents. We, the Hillingdon Conservatives, place such importance on this budget because we want to do as many good things as possible for those who live here. This budget keeps all of Hillingdon's residents' living costs low. The cost of using one of our leisure centres or swimming pools is at least 10% cheaper than our neighbouring boroughs. The cost of parking in one of our high streets is only 20p an hour. You can take a walk for free in one of our 200 green spaces. and you can find free entertainment in one of our 17 libraries. We are the only council in the country to have rebuilt and refurbished every one of our libraries. Each day there are fun activities and free classes for our young children in a library near you. Our libraries host open mic nights, talks by authors, have free Wi-Fi and workspaces. You can even wage war with armies across miniature battlefields in the ultimate contest of strategy and skill, according to the Hillingdon website anyway, by joining the Warhammer Club. Maybe we could try and solve some planning disputes this way. And let's not forget the books, the thousands of books that you can borrow to expand your mind. For example, if you want to understand Labour's response to this budget, you could borrow Chairman Mao's Little Red Book, though unfortunately it's only available from Hayes Library and is currently out on a long-term loan. Though, if you want to know more about the consequences of socialist policies, I could recommend you reading Mao's Great Famine by Frank Dakota. Hillingdon Conservatives know that the better you manage your finances, the more good things you could do. We do the detailed things well so that our residents can have interesting and fulfilling lives. This is not a dreamy budget. It's a sound budget which allows all our residents to fulfil their dreams. I'm proud to recommend this budget and will be honoured to vote for it.
Thank you, Councillor Dennis. Should you want a copy of the Little Red Book, I actually have one.
Far better than...
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the problems going towards the end is I've been sitting here slowly ticking off all the comments that everybody else has done, so I'm not going to be repeating myself, but my speech is a little bit shorter than it was originally. While I was reading the budget, it occurred to me that it has something in common with a part of our body. It's like a pair of lungs. Nobody really talks about the lungs. They're not a particularly sexy part of your conversation daily. But just like lungs, you get a budget wrong, you get critical failure. And that's what's happening around England from council to council. We're witnessing critical failure as councils do their very best to try and struggle with these short words. You've got to do more with less. Easy to say, hard to do. But what I'm extremely proud of is looking through this budget, how Hillingdon Conservatives have been able to create a budget that does just that. Going back to the lungs analogy, we don't need resuscitation. We're not on life support. We are a breath of fresh air. See what I did there? And I wholeheartedly recommend this budget. Thank you.
Councillor D. Mills, please.
Mr. Mayor, my portfolio covers a very large part of the day-to-day spending across this authority, so I won't be able to give credit to all the different aspects. So I just want to pick up some certain points. First, let's nail this Labour lie that they have this system where, by not increasing the council tax in other councils, they are not hurting the poor and vulnerable. Putting a charge on green waste is hurting the poor and vulnerable in those authorities. We are much more open and transparent, and yes, we're very proud to stand by our record that the council tax is at the same level as what it was 8 years ago. Secondly, I think what we need to get across is the impact of the mayoral and GLA precept. I've heard nothing from the Labour Party that promises us that there will be a continued downward spiral, and therefore, are you actually saying to us that a vote for other than ZAC is going to be a vote for a council tax increase next year because of the precept that will be imposed upon us? That's what happened before Boris. Hillingdon, like many outer London boroughs, was seen as a chequebook for a Mayor of London who thought it ended at Shepherd's Bush. We are going to make sure that that doesn't happen again. Let's see what we actually get with our money. This budget will allow us to continue to support a whole range of activities. The Chrysalis programme. And yes, is it biased? No, because we go from Harefield in the north with a community centre down to Useley and West Drayton's community centre. We go out to the east to Eastcote in terms of a skateboard park, and we go out west with other schemes as well. We cover the whole borough, and that's what we should be doing. One of the things which I'm very proud to be hosting in a couple of weeks is the second of the Street Champions events. And we had one in the south of the borough not so many weeks ago now, and many of the Labour councillors were present. And you will recall, and Councillor Sweeting was there, and she will recall, an individual from Ealing said, "I'm so pleased I left Ealing and moved to Hillingdon." And where did they come from? West Drayton. So, people are coming to this borough because of what we offer. But I want to finish on our town centres, because the town centres is where we actually really help, not just the shopkeepers, but the residents and the poor and vulnerable. Because if we allow the town centres to die, they have nowhere to go to get their day-to-day provisions so locally. It becomes so much difficult. We have achieved in Harefield improvements. We are achieving in Barn Hill. Now, who represents Barn Hill? Councillor Eggington. We are starting work in his patch. That's how unkind we are to the Labour Party. And we're going to go into Eastcote, and we're finishing off Hayes Town Centre, and we are going to do more great stuff in Uxbridge, our metropolitan town centre. We are transforming the borough. We are doing it on a balanced budget, putting our first, and we do it with a...
Would you wind up, please? In the absence of any further speakers, Councillor Puddifoot, do you wish to exercise your right to...
And just to confirm, Mr Mayor, this is the unlimited speaking time as the seconder of the motion.
Thank you. Like councils around the country, we are continuing to deal with the effects of the government's deficit reduction programme. Whilst it is justifiably arguable that local government is suffering to a greater extent than other government departments, the reality of life is that we have to play the hand that we are dealt to the best of our ability. We have, like many other councils, seen a reduction in central government funding of 65%, that's £73 million since 2010-11, at a time when our population is rising at both ends, with more children being born and people living longer. We must also consider that it is estimated that further reductions of around 30% in government funding will occur in the years to 2021, which is why, as we've been doing for many years, we do not just prepare annual budgets in isolation, but consider as best possible how we can deal with the challenges that still lay ahead of us through a medium-term financial forecast. Tonight, Mr Mayor, we will freeze council tax for all residents for an 8th year in a row. It will be the 10th year for residents over 65, and we have already funded the freeze for over 65s for a further 2 years. In addition, as we've heard, we have the added advantage of a Conservative London Mayor in Boris Johnson, with the same financial acumen as we have in Hillingdon. So this year he will reduce the mayoral precept, so that Hillingdon taxpayers will see a small reduction in their council tax bill. Indeed, over his 8 years in office, he has reduced the precept by 10%, which seems a fairly small amount, but compare that with the increase over the previous 8 years under Ken Livingstone of a massive 153%. A right 153% in 8 years. Now that is the stark difference between a Conservative and Labour administration in City Hall. Mr Mayor, I said earlier that all councils have suffered reductions in government funding, but how many have dealt with that challenge has differed remarkably from what has occurred in Hillingdon. Whilst those around us have closed down facilities, cut services and charged residents for more basic services, in Hillingdon we have not done so. In fact, in most cases we've done the reverse, building new facilities and improving services, and at the same time building up financial reserves to help with the challenges that lay ahead of us. I will come back to reserves later, but for the moment let us take stock of where we are and where we're going. And I make no apology for repeating some of the things that my Cabinet colleagues have already mentioned. What we have achieved is frankly remarkable and worth repeating. We have, over the years, whilst dealing with the major reductions in funding support, rebuilt or refurbished every one of our 17 libraries, and we're keeping them open for longer. We've provided some of the best sports and leisure facilities in London. We've invested in our parks and open spaces, with Hillingdon being awarded more green flags than any other council in the UK for 3 consecutive years. We've invested record amounts in roadway servicing. We have one of the largest schools building programmes in London. We have a free-to-use weekly refuse and recycling collection that is the envy of residents in other boroughs. Initiatives for the over 65s, such as free burglar alarms, free allotments, free swimming, support for dining and social clubs, and free telecare line for over 80s. funding of £1 million a year for environmental initiatives through the Chrysalis Fund, support for our high streets and businesses, a £400,000 a year sports and activity fund, our first-time buyers initiative to support local residents wishing to purchase their first property, a policy on fees and charges for residents which has the lowest parking charges and other fees and charges set at 90% of what our neighbouring boroughs charge. So, given that we already do all that, and with a general fund savings target of 13.3 million for 16-17, what does next year look like for Hillingdon? As I said to the Conservative group on Monday, frankly, it looks amazing. Are there any planned service cuts? No. Are there any planned facility closures? No. For the next 3 years, we have some smaller initiatives and some larger ones. £25,000 each for support for carers and domestic violence prevention, £100,000 for planning enforcement, £40,000 for environmental enforcement, £140,000 for a museum curator and visitor centre manager, plus £700,000 held in reserve for priority growth that emerges in year. It would be financially inept to allocate everything at the start of the year. £400,000 set aside for fighting the High Speed 2 and third runway proposals. £47 million next year on our new schools programme. £2 million to build the first of our new 3 youth centres. £2.5 million to be spent in Hayes Town Centre improvements. £4 million in roads and pavement resurfacing. £700,000 for Bowls Club refurbishments. £950,000 to rebuild Bessingby Football and Boxing Club. £3.6 million for a state-of-the-art visitor and education centre at the Battle of Britain Bunker. £5 million as the first tranche of £44 million to build a 1,400 to 1,600 seat theatre in Uxbridge. £1.6 million of the £5 million to be spent on providing a museum for the borough. £100,000 for a new mobile library. £250,000 as part of £1.25 million programme on children's playground upgrades. £2 million for refurbishment work in the Civic Centre. £1 million in addition to the Chrysalis funding for environmental and other initiatives. £2.6 million for CCTV to enforce parking restrictions outside every school in the borough. And as we've heard, income from parking tickets will not fund the cost of this, but it is an important road safety initiative. And £3 million of the £5.5 million to be spent over the next 2 years to replace the lamps in every one of our lamp columns in the borough with LED lamps. Mr Mayor, I referred earlier to the cuts in funding that we've anticipating still lie ahead of us, and to help us deal with these in a business-like and structured manner, rather than the reactive slash-and-burn approach of some councils, we have built up nearly £50 million in reserves and balances. The minimum we require is £15 million. And to put this in perspective, our neighbouring boroughs, Ealing, will have £15.5 million, and Harrow, £10 million in balances. We have £50 million in reserves to take us into the years ahead. The position of our housing revenue and capital account is very strong, probably the strongest in London. And whilst housing legislation and supply is in a state of flux at this time, we are well placed to deal with what lays ahead of us. As well as increased balances, we've also paid down debt, which has given us borrowing ability should we require it. It will only be done against a proper business case and specific options. It takes strong financial management to achieve what we have in both general funds and the HRA, and we do that all day, every day. Our programme of business improvement delivery, service transformation and zero-based budgeting have set us apart from other councils, and they set us, as an administration, apart from the opposition, who year after year confess to not understanding what we're doing. Mr Mayor, what we have achieved and continue to achieve in Hillingdon in the current economic climate is remarkable. And I would like to thank my Cabinet colleagues, particularly Councillor Bianco, and all members of the Conservative group who in one way or another are making this happen. Could I also thank 2 officers, the Finance Director, Paul Wayman, and the Deputy Chief Executive, Jean Palmer, who just seem to pick up and deal with the queries or initiatives that they are given on a regular basis. And I cannot leave out the staff of this council, who with very few exceptions provide excellent service to our residents. Mr Mayor, we do not underestimate the financial challenges that we as a council and a country still have to deal with. But in Hillingdon, the Conservative administration have a proven record of management and financial ability that is not remotely matched by any party in this chamber. And it is this that enables us to continue to put residents first. Mr Mayor, this is a first-class budget for a first-class borough. I'm delighted to formally second it.
Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll follow that, and I don't intend to for very long. I would like to, however, thank Councillor Lavery and the leader for mentioning one area that I usually try to work into most of my speeches when given the chance, which is the Green Flag Awards, of course. I haven't brought the map tonight, which I feel is a bit of a loss, but the fact that we have 34 green flags is usually worth a mention, and so I mention it. But and one other thing I did think about that I hadn't mentioned perhaps as fully and has been touched on again, of course, are the LED lights. It's a big project, and I don't think perhaps people appreciate this. You know, we're going to change every single lamp standard light in the borough. That's 23,900. And to put that into context, we're going to do that over 2 years, which means there's 11,950 to be done every year. And that means that 230 have got to be done a week, and that's 46 a day. On a 5-day week, on 52 weeks of the year. It's going to be very busy. So I hope we've got enough ladders. But that is no small task. You know, 46 per day, every working day for 2 years is no small task. And it's going to take some organising to achieve. It's going to have significant effects both in improving the light in our streets and at night, and of course it's an appropriate moment to remind everybody that of course the lights stay on in our streets all night, and not, as in many of our neighbouring boroughs, off at 12 o'clock, just at the time you need them. These lights of ours stay on all night and protect and provide safety to our residents, and it is something, yet another thing, that our residents have come to look forward to and expect from us. Mr. Mayor, you've heard from my colleagues at some length on a wide-ranging aspects of this budget. The only other thing I want to remind people of course, is the fact that over the 8 years and 10 years of the real-time cuts that we've actually provided in terms of the savings to our residents by not increasing the council tax, the significant amounts of money they've saved through the, if you like, inflation effect. And at that point, I would just like to recommend this budget to everybody, and even the other side should have the wisdom to vote for it. Thank you.
Now, we've now moved to the vote. It's going to be a recorded vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for hopefully the last time. Just to clarify, members will be voting on the recommendations, the 17 recommendations on pages 4 to 7. Please indicate if you're in favour of that motion, against or abstaining. Councillor Ahmad Wallana? Councillor Allen? Councillor Barnes? Councillor Bianco? Councillor Birra? Councillor Bridges? Councillor Burles? Councillor Burrows? Councillor Chamdell? Councillor J. Cooper? Councillor Cawthorne, Councillor Crowe, Councillor Curling, Councillor Dan, Councillor Davis, Councillor Dennis, Councillor Deere, Councillor Dillon, Councillor Dott, Councillor Deduccio, Councillor Duncan, Councillor East, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Edgington, Councillor Flynn, Councillor Fife, Councillor Garg, Councillor Gillam, Councillor Graham, Councillor Hagger, Councillor Higgins, Councillor Jackson, Councillor Jarjusi, Councillor Kaufman, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Katra, Councillor Kashid, Councillor Lakmana, Councillor Lavery, Councillor Lewis, Councillor Markham, Councillor Melvin, Councillor D. Mills, Councillor R. Mills, Councillor Money, Councillor Morgan, Councillor Morse, Councillor Nelson, Councillor O'Brien, Councillor Oswell, Councillor Palmer, Councillor Puddifoot, Councillor Sansapuri, Councillor Seaman Digby, Councillor Simmons, Councillor Singh, Councillor Stead, Councillor Sweeting, Councillor White, Councillor Yarrow, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Deputy Mayor. That's carried unanimously.
Now that concludes the business of the council. I would like to congratulate the students from Brunel on their excellent patience, and I trust that you found it interesting because although it may seem a very strange process, it is one that affects the lives of every single resident within Hillingdon. So it is very important, the budget, and it is well worth looking at it in some detail. I would also like to wish you well with your career and your studies in journalism, and sincerely hope that sitting through this meeting hasn't put you off following journalism as a career. Thank you, everyone.